Amen. So we are traveling the world in this series on Wednesday nights on biblical places. And tonight we're going to visit Temple Mount. There's lots of great mountains in the world. I've never climbed Kilimanjaro or Mount Rainier or Hood. I've climbed one mountain, the South Sister in Oregon. But this mountain, Temple Mount, and the mountains of Jerusalem are more consequential than any other mountain anywhere in the world, including Mount Mazama or St. Helens. From my house, I can see, out on the street, I can see both St. Helens and Rainier. And so, when things get to rumbling, you think that's the most important mountain. But let me tell you something, things are rumbling in the whole world. The mountains of Jerusalem are the consequential mountains. This picture that I have is kind of the opening picture, is of Temple Mount. And there's a little flat stone here underneath the Dome of the Spirit and the tablets, and of course the iconic Dome of the Rock there, that Golden Dome building, which has been around for a very long time. But we want to talk about Temple Mount. Temple Mount today is about 40 acres, about the size of the church property here in Bothell. And this picture here is of Temple Mount with the Golden Dome shot through a telephoto lens. And so the rest of the city of Jerusalem behind it, the rising hill, kind of pulls into closer proximity. Maybe today the most famous part of Temple Mount is in fact what's called the Western Wall. That wall that you see there toward the right in the back is the part that remains of Solomon's, or rather of King Herod's temple. Well, it isn't truly the temple. What it is, it's the retaining wall around the edge of the 40-acre parcel. So in order to make the Temple Mount flat, you build these big retaining walls and then fill it in so that you've got a big flat surface up there. But this is considered for Judaism the holiest place because it is nearest to what used to be the temple, where they have access. For many years, the Muslims didn't allow them even to go there. And then, of course, since 1967, when Israel took control of this area entirely, they've been able to go freely there. But this particular rail that you see here, on the right-hand side is for the women, and on the left-hand side is for the men. So if you go to the Western Wall, you divide up by gender. I mean, these days, I don't know, what do you do when you are male but identify as female? These are questions which I don't seem they know how to address. But, on top of Temple Mount, it's different than what you think. You see the Golden Dome building, and you think, okay, that's Temple Mount, and it is. But this is also Temple Mount. There are these they're just multiple entrances. One entrance is at the Western Wall, and other entrances come from different parts of the city. And so here's some people of our group. They've just come through one of those walls, and this is on top of Temple Mount. Here's a couple of ladies in our group just getting ready to go into one of the entrances of Temple Mount. But you get there, and then you get up on top, on kind of the flat part, and it looks like this. It's just flagstone, basically, that covers probably half of Temple Mount. Half of it, and I have some pictures that I'll show you a little bit later, probably half of it is covered in dirt with like olive trees growing out of it, or different kinds of trees. And so it's a lot of different things up there. And this is just some of our group wandering around on Temple Mount on a given occasion. Temple Mount is one of the places that you don't guarantee that you get to visit when you go, because it will depend on if there's any difficulty. You don't go there on a Friday for sure, because that's when the Muslims go. And you try not to be around Temple Mount when they get out of their meetings, because they're typically all hyped up. But, you can put 100,000 people up there pretty easily. Well, on 40 acres, you could probably put a million people, if they're all standing. People could definitely pack in there back in the day, and even so today. So this is the place that we want to take you and let you visit and walk around, in a way. But I'd like to, since this is a Bible study as well, take you back to the beginning, if you will, of Temple Mount and where Mount Moriah gained its first notoriety. And so the question that really comes down to, did Abraham offer Isaac on Mount Moriah? Most people would answer yes, that this is the place where Isaac was offered by his father Abraham. But that's the area that the tree, all of those trees that you see there beyond the wall are part of Temple Mount. So you can see it's a big area. So we're going to go back to the book of Genesis, chapter 22, and I'll read the story of 18 verses out of it. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah." I underlined region of Moriah as opposed to Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is a specific mountain. The region of Moriah would be this area around where Mount Moriah is. And by the way, when you think about mounts, okay, there's multiple mountains that you're looking at there. And so it just helps you to know that when the Bible says mountain this or mountain that, only if you're from that part of the world and not from this part of the world. We have mountains and they have molehills. But that would just be a Northwesterner's view of the whole thing. Okay, so God says to Abraham, "Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." That's an important sentence. Go to the land of Moriah and go to one of the mountains that I'll tell you about. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. And he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the donkey carries the wood from Hebron, a couple days' journey, and now they're somewhere in the valley here. And the wood is, the young strapping boy who's probably 18 or so, he carries the load. And the burnt, or the knife and the fire, Abraham, who's 118 years old, he carries the light stuff. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called this place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. As I said, most people think that this story takes place on Mount Moriah, somewhere in the proximity of this golden dome. And we did notice that God said, go to the land of Moriah, to one of the mountains that I'm going to show you. So God said there's multiple mountains there, and there are 7. So he said, when you get there, I'll show you where to go. If God meant for him to go to Mount Moriah, he would have said, go to Mount Moriah. You don't have to show him, just go where it is, and then it's all going to be good. And so I have concluded from this that Isaac was sacrificed not on Mount Moriah, as Judaism would say, and as most of the world would say, but he was sacrificed somewhere else. And that somewhere else I'd like to try to point out to you. Now, you're looking here at the Golden Dome, but you notice just to the left of the Golden Dome, there are 2 gray domes. Do you see them there? And maybe this picture, you can see it a little clearer. There's 2 gray domes slightly to the left of center. Those 2 domes cover the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. One is the place where Jesus was crucified. The other is the place where Jesus was raised from the dead. But they're in the area there. I mean, that is the gray dome. And from this spot, well, here I've circled it. From the Golden Dome to the 2 domes of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it's got to be, 250 yards, maybe at the most 300 yards. So less than a quarter of a mile away. And remember, God said, go to the place that I'm going to show you. Now, if Jesus was crucified there, I'd like for you to think about the similarities between the death of Jesus and the potential death of Isaac. Both of them are there at the request of the Father. The Heavenly Father asked Jesus to do this thing. Abraham asks his son. When it comes time to ascend to the place, Jesus carries the wood of his own sacrifice, the same as Isaac did. In both cases, they were willing to do it. Jesus clearly was willing to offer his life, and Isaac clearly was willing to offer his life. And so and how do I know that? I know that because Isaac is 18 and Abraham is 118. Well, if there's going to be a fight between 2 guys with that age, I'm putting my money on the 18-year-old each and every time. Because it's just not going to be a contest. And so clearly Isaac was willing to defer to his father even at the cost of his own life. So he is a willing son. And they get up there, in this case, in the land of Moriah, and Isaac points out that there's no sacrifice here. And the response of Abraham is one of those heavily laden spiritual answers. Because he said, God will provide himself the sacrifice. Which is exactly what happened on Calvary. God provided himself as the sacrifice. And so what you see are these amazing parallels. And so my feeling is that when Abraham and Isaac got to the land of Moriah, God didn't tell him to go where the golden dome is, but he told him to go to the exact same place where Jesus would be offered. The other one who is the only Son. You know, God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. You know, it's interesting to refer to Isaac in this way, because was Isaac at this moment in time the only son of Abraham? Who was the other son? Huh? Yeah, from Hagar. The son from Hagar. And so Isaac, even though he's referred to here as the one and only son, there was this other son. But from a spiritual point of view, he is the one and only because he is the son of promise. He's the one through which the inheritance is going to flow. It's just interesting terminology that he would be referred to as the only son of Abraham in the same way that Jesus is described as the one and only Son of God, which of course he is in the literal sense. But there are others who are not in the same category, if you will, like us, for example. So it's interesting to think about this. And you know, when Jesus was dying on the cross, I have a theory that the one person who was with the Father in heaven would be Abraham. Because there's nobody else on heaven and earth who understood that moment like Abraham did. Because he had been there himself in that same place and looked on the same scene in the same location. And maybe the Father said to Abraham, say, Abraham, do you recognize the spot? Do you recognize what's happening there? It's the same spot. And by the way, it's something, what I've just described to you, you only really come to those conclusions by looking at a piece of property with your own eyes. Because when you look at that scene, you know, you just see it differently when you see it directly than if you read about it in a book. Seeing it is pretty significant. So that is the first great moment for Mount Moriah, or as I've expanded that, to the land of Moriah and to the place that God would show him. But that captures it in that spot. The second major moment for Temple Mount was the arrival of David. Now, you know that they're going, you know, as we studied, I think it was last week, the tabernacle was up at Shiloh for how many years? Yeah, pretty close, 369 years. So a long time it's up there. But David is the one who brings the Ark of the Covenant eventually. It has to travel a little circuitous journey, but he's the one who's going to bring it to this spot, and where he wants to build a temple, and where his son Solomon will build the temple. So Solomon's temple is somewhere in the location of the 40 acres that are Temple Mount. And I showed you some of these pictures. David moves the Ark of the Covenant to the temple. This is that model, as I spoke last week, that's down in the Sinai, or down by Elat. And so we want to talk about some of the connections between it. Let me just pause here. Yeah. So this is an interesting, you look at these stones. This is on Temple Mount. And it looks like, you can see the paving stones, kind of rough. You see this wall there. And then you see that rock at the bottom, kind of in the crack there, that's kind of seems to be unrelated to anything else. And the question is, what is that stone there? And why is it still exposed in the way that it is? And I'd like to just show you kind of the development of this particular hilltop, or the Temple Mount. So the largest rectangle here would be the 40-acre parcel that is that King Herod built. But you can see the label right in the center, Solomon's original platform wall. So his square is much smaller inside, and so that was as it would have been up until King Herod, and he greatly expands it and makes it much bigger. You can see he puts in these retaining walls around the outside. The Romans built a fortress there, for Fort Antonia, and they fill in this upper part. But you see that the top center, it says, the top of Mount, Ark sat here on bedrock. So there is this hilltop, if you will, that is flat, and I'd just like to point that out to you. So I am of the opinion, and it's not just me, I actually read it in Biblical Archaeology Review, but that stone, which you see, that strange-looking stone there, where it's located, is probably a part of Solomon's original structure, because it relates to that wall that's around there. And so the article that I read in Biblical Archaeology Review said that of the things on Temple Mount, that this particular stone is probably the only thing that's presently visible that once belonged to Solomon's temple. And so when last time I was there, I was talking to the group about this stone. And so, and of course there's Muslim guards everywhere. I've been booted off Temple Mount for reading the Bible up there. And so you have to do everything very surreptitiously. And so I point to the Golden Dome. And I said, now do you see this stone at my feet? And everybody started, because I'm trying to throw the guard off, but all the people, I said, look at the stone by my feet. I said, no, by my feet, down there where my feet actually are, And so I'm pointing up like this, and I'm describing this stone down here, and it's what it was. And they finally figured out the right way to do it. But now let's read some of the details out of 2 Samuel 24. And this is how David essentially acquired Temple Mount. When the angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord was grieved because of the calamity and said to the angel who was afflicting the people, enough, withdraw your hand. The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. When David saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to the Lord, I am the one who has sinned and done wrong, but these are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall upon me and my family. On that day, Gad went to David and said to him, go up, build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up as the Lord had commanded through God. When Araunah looked and saw the king and his men coming toward him, he went out and bowed down before the king with his face to the ground. Araunah said, why has my lord the king come to his servant to buy your threshing floor? David answered, so I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague on the people may be stopped. Araunah said to David, let my lord the king take whatever pleases him and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering. Here are threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. O king, Araunah gives all this to the king. Araunah also said to him, may the Lord your God accept you. Now you can understand this. King with his men comes up, and this guy's standing there, and he says, what do you want, king? I'd like to buy your field. Well, you can have it. I mean, you don't have to buy it from me. I'm going to give this to you. And not, you want to make an offering? Okay, here's the wood. You can burn these yoke, and take these oxen right here. I mean, he knows good and well, David, who's a powerful warrior, I mean, he can have whatever he wants. And so, it's just like someone comes and says, can I have your life or your money? You don't say, let me think about that for a minute. You say, hey, whatever you want is all yours. It's kind of it's a predictable scene, isn't it? When the dictator essentially shows up. But the king replied to Araunah, no, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen and paid 50 shekels of silver for them. Shekels meaning a weight. It's not, today they have shekels in Israel, but it's actually an amount of weight. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Lord answered prayer in behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was stopped. First of all, it's interesting that David buys Temple Mount. Just think about that. He buys it. And when did David ever sell it? He doesn't sell it. So he pays for it. In the same way that Abraham down in Hebron paid excessively for the cave of Machpelah. So you have two of the most controversial places in Israel, Hebron and Temple Mount, that were paid for by two of the great people, two of the great Jewish people. Abraham, the founder, David, the king. They paid for the land, and it's recorded here. He buys it. It records the price. And so you've got, all you need for a document or for a transaction is a date, an agreement, and a transfer of something of value. And so this is a sale. And David is now the owner of it, which is interesting when you think about the contest, the dispute for Abraham, or for Temple Mount. How would you resolve that? Whose land is it? Where is the title to this land? And the answer is, it's right here in the book of Genesis. Not Genesis, where is it? 2 Samuel, yeah. It's in 2 Samuel that the deed for that property transfer is recorded, publicly stated, and printed millions of times over the years. So it's a purchase. Now, the purchase was of a threshing floor. The thing about a threshing floor is that, first of all, you put a threshing floor on a hilltop because you want the wind to be, when you crush the grain and knock the hulls off kind of thing, then you toss it up into the air and you're waiting for the wind to come along and blow the chaff away. So you don't do it in the valley, you do it on a hilltop where there's the maximum amount of wind. So that tells us that the threshing floor is on a hilltop. Also, you don't use a threshing floor, you don't use a stone or dirt because you'll mess it up with the grain. And so you use a stone if at all possible. And you want a flat stone. You don't want one with a bunch of cracks in it and crevices. It's not like trapping gold or something. You want you want it to be smooth so you can run your little shovel in there and pick it up when you're done. And so a flat stone is most desirable. And as we had pointed out earlier, it's on Temple Mount. So let me just show you a few more pictures before I come back to that. This is from the model of Temple Mount. It shows, this would be of Herod's temple, with the temple actually being in the center, and then the big 40-acre courtyard and porticos and all of that surrounding it. This is at the Israeli Museum. And this picture is shot from when you come down from the Jewish quarter, you go down through quite a few stairs, and this is actually taken on a rooftop where the guy that built this built a model, different from the one we just looked at, built a model of the temple. And so you can stand up on his rooftop and look at this model and see where it once was, right there where the Golden Dome is. So, they're making their points. Pastor Jay teaching down in the Garden of Gethsemane with the Eastern Gate just behind there, and Temple Mount just in the distance. I took this picture. I liked it because the Eastern Gate is framed there. But one of the things I'd like for you to see is, going back to this picture, you can just see the Golden Dome kind of between the tree branches on the left, and you can see the Eastern Gate between the branches on the right. And that shows it a slightly different angle there. And that'll be significant in a moment. When you're standing on Temple Mount, this picture is interesting to me, at least, because in the foreground you don't see it. It's obscured by the trees, but you can see a little bit of a dome there kind of in the middle center. That is actually the Eastern Gate. And I took this picture to illustrate the fact that, do you see that tower in the distance? That's the Russian Orthodox tower there. It's kind of like actually a monastery with a little chapel. And you basically, the priest, when certain sacrifices were offered, like when the red heifer was offered, it was sacrificed on the Mount of Olives. And the priest could look out from the temple straight through the Eastern Gate and could see where that sacrifice of the red heifer was taking place on the Mount of Olives. And so if the temple is here, where we're looking from, you can look across and then you can see the spot where all of that was taking place. And this will go to demonstrating where we think the temple actually was built, rather than where some people say it was built. The next picture illustrates something else. Okay, look to the right, that little dome, gray dome there, and then those arches behind it. There's a tower, which is a Lutheran church in the background there. I once climbed up on that tower, got up in the top and took my shofar and gave a big rip on the shofar from up on top of that tower. That was kind of a fun day. But anyway, and then you notice to the left, you see the little cross above the two gray domes. That's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And what this series of pictures is designed to show, that there is essentially a straight line, east and west, from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre through Temple Mount, where the tabernacle and the temple were located. And I'm going to propose to you that underneath that dome is where the Ark of the Covenant once sat. And then straight across the Eastern Great Gate, straight across in a straight line to the Mount of Olives, where the ashes of the red heifer were generated in the sacrifice of that. This next picture is this dome is called the Dome of the Spirit and the Tablets. And so if the Ark of the Covenant was once there, which I believe it was, it's interesting, no one seems to know where they got the term for this particular little structure, the Dome of the Spirit and the Tablets. Well, what is inside the Ark of the Covenant? The Ten Commandments. And dwelling between the cherubim, what's there? That's the presence of God. The Spirit of God is there. And so the Dome of the Spirit and the Tablets, I think, harkens back to the reality that this is where the Ark of the Covenant once sat. And then the picture that I had at the opening, this is underneath that dome. And what's unique about this is that, and this picture shows another angle of that, is on all the 40 acres of Temple Mount, this is the only uncut stone that's visible. In other words, everything else is paving stones, flagstones. But this is, and there's no evidence of chiseling or any other type of preparation of this stone. I mean, it's obviously cracking and things like that, but it is a natural stone. And the Ark of the Covenant set upon a flat stone. And if you can just visualize that picture I showed you, the illustration of where the temples were, the Mount Moriah had this flat place on top where the Ark of the Covenant sat, inside the tabernacle, and then later inside Solomon's temple. And the fact that it's the only flat stone there suggests to me that this is where it is. And there's a Hebrew professor at Hebrew University named Kaufman, Professor Kaufman, who developed a theory that the temple was not located where the Dome of the Rock is. Because if you go inside the Dome of the Rock, there's no flat stone in there. It's very rough. I mean, there's cut places, but there's no flat place. And so it's a big stone, and it probably is the highest point on Temple Mount, but there's no place that would serve as a threshing floor, because it's all crevicey and very clearly like that. I mean, there's a cave underneath it and all of that, but this is the only place that would qualify for that. So I think this is the threshing floor. This is where, according to Kaufman, and I agree with it, the temple was located. And so when the question is, if they have to have the third temple built someday to fulfill Ezekiel, which we'll end with tonight, where are they going to put it? Are they going to blow up the Dome of the Rock and build it there? I don't think you need to. I think you leave the Dome of the Rock right where it sits, and you build your tabernacle right here, with the Ark of the Covenant can sit in exactly the same spot where it did from David's time through Solomon and up until it disappears from the pages of history in 586 BC. And it's on that east-west grid, and everything about it, in my opinion. And the other interesting thing about it, when you look at the chart of, I don't think I showed you a picture. I don't think I have one here. But when you look at the grounds and how they're all laid out, if the temple was here, then the golden dome was in the court of the Gentiles, which would be interesting. Because you have, the court of the women, the court of the Gentiles, and it would be located in the area that would be known as the court of the Gentiles. And it seems reasonable to me that when Ezekiel's temple is rebuilt, that I think the Jews could very well have kind of their own spot here, and the Gentiles can have their spot under the Golden Dome. And it would be the temple of the Lord, like it has been in centuries past, and everybody's happy. But that's a theory, and it's my theory. Okay. So let's go back to another idea here, to this temple. And looking at it from here, let me just say, you see the eastern gate, how it opens right into the temple. Basically, the Golden Dome sits in that big courtyard to the left. If you were locating the Golden Dome in this setting, it would be to the left there. And so, anyway, that's what it is. Well, when people go to the Western Wall, you go there and you write down a prayer, and you go to the Western Wall and you stuff that prayer into the cracks of the stone. And it's an interesting practice. What Pastor Jay has over here in the sanctuary, where these places where you put your prayer requests and roll them up and put them into that wall there, that's very much a Western Wall kind of an idea. Well, why would anybody think that stuffing prayers into the Western Wall has any greater effect? I had a Jewish friend who asked me when I went on one of my trips, he gave me a little bit of money, and he said, here, stick this in the wall when you get there, and along with the prayer. And so I carried it there for him. But why would anybody do such a thing? In 1 Kings chapter 8, you have a bit of the answer. As for the foreigner who does not belong to your people Israel, but has come from a distant land because of your name, for men will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm. When he comes and prays toward this temple, then hear from heaven, your dwelling place, and do whatever the foreigner asks of you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your own people Israel, and may know that this house I have built bears your name. So Solomon's prayer at the dedication of the temple is to say to the Lord, Lord, the day's going to come when people are going to come to this place and pray toward this temple because of your name. And when they do that, then hear their prayer. That's basically the statement. That's why people pray at the Western Wall, and foreigners go and pray at the Western Wall. Because if Solomon's prayer is of any effect, then he has introduced us to offer our prayers at the Western Wall, and they can be answered. Well, let me just show you a few more pictures here. This is from the model. You're going to see this, the southern wall. So you have the western wall, the southern wall, and to the right, the eastern wall. And you notice that there's gates there. There's a double gate and a triple gate that goes, basically it's like a stadium, like when you go through the tunnels to go up into the stadium. That's what those are. You go in those doors there, and that takes you up onto Temple Mount. So if you're coming from the south, Mount of Olives, you would, or that's east, coming from the south, then you'd go through those gates. If you came from the west, you would go through across these various like Robinson's Arch and such like that, where you could walk directly into it. This is some people praying at the western wall, but I think you can see see the little pieces of paper stuffed in the cracks there. And here's another guy. You can see this does show that. But I mean, people go there and pray. Now, yeah, here, look at this picture. You can see all stuffed in those cracks, little prayers that people have prayed and stuffed it in the wall there. And so it's a nice thing to do. Just watching my phone to see if anybody's texting in any questions, because I sent out anyway. Now, let me just take you through this Temple Mount and some of the aspects of it. The wall that Herod built, the retaining wall, this that you're looking at is one stone. It's 41 feet long. It's 11.5 feet tall. It may weigh as much as 660 tons. If you're a builder, how would you like for the plans to read, put that one up? Can you imagine moving a stone? And this is actually not the bottom stone. I mean, the wall goes down another 50 feet. So, I mean, you're putting that thing up in the air, way up in the air when you're building it. I mean, today it's all filled in around it. But I mean, it's a monster stone. Those little cuts in the wall there are where, basically boards would have been put in so they could tie ropes to it and such and give some leverage, for oxen or something like that to pull it around. This is a picture taken at the southern wall. You see the three gates. They're boarded up there. And this would show you kind of how those gates or those would have led up into Temple Mount. That picture illustrates that. Some of the southern steps. I mean, and the steps that you see there in the foreground are go back to the time of Christ. So you can almost be 100% certain that Jesus walked up those steps on more than one occasion. When they excavated this a few years ago, it's of interest to me, they found about 30,000 ancient coins. An enormous number of coins were found there. Of course, there's millions of ancient coins in the world today. And this is another picture on those southern steps. Some of the originals there. Down in the front here, there's, when you excavate, you go through centuries of building and rebuilding. And so identifying what's what is not an easy thing to do. But there's all kinds of mikvahs, baptistries essentially. And many people believe that on the day of Pentecost, when 3,000 people got saved, where do they go to be baptized? There's no river around. And so they would have walked down to these mikvahs and been baptized down there. There was enough to process them, but that's one of the theories. Those are the domes up close of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But here's a couple of those. This is the southern wall, the southern steps I've been describing. There's an inscription that's circled there from Antonius Pius, and there's an arch. This picture kind of identifies, so there's the Roman inscription. There's Herodian, arch stones. The lintel is Herodian. And the Umayyad arch, that would be from one of the Muslim dynasties that was there. So here's a building that's got Roman, Herodian. It has Muslim. And it's all part of one wall. And so, stones, good building materials, especially if it's made out of stone, is going to get used many times. I'll show you the picture without the labels on it. So when you just go up and look at it, that's what you see. That's why it's nice to have labels. Notice these four kind of trapezoidal stones that form the arch of the double gate. Those go back to the days of Herod. The decorative arch from the 600s, square stone that sets immediately to the right is all of these stones, every one of them has some kind of a history. And that another picture of that, and you can see when you get up close to it that there is actually the inscription, Antonius Pius in Latin there. And the original stones, and then you can see where they've repaired them as well. But it's a cool place to sit and realize you're sitting on the steps of the church. This picture shows a lot of the elements in that side, the south side. The El Aqsa Mosque, that's probably the Church of Mary. Was converted into a mosque. It's not the Golden Dome is not a mosque. It's a memorial, but it's not a mosque. Some people call it the Mosque of Omar, which it is not. But the Al Aqsa Mosque is one of the big ones there on top of Temple Mount. Just more of pictures. There's the triple gate. You come out in Solomon's colonnade up above into that. The beautiful gate of Acts 3 may be this triple gate. Some people believe that. The door jamb has Hebrew writing on it. The remains of some of these pillars here, remains of the Temple of Jupiter that was built on Temple Mount by the Romans in the pagan period. Most likely, columns like this have almost all of them are going to have multiple use history. So these we know that were also used in the Muslim temples, but very likely they came out of Byzantine churches in the area. But, they trace, like if you go to Istanbul at Hagia Sophia, there's pillars in there which they believe came from the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. So you get a nice marble column like this. It was expensive then, it's expensive now. And so, if you're going to take down the Temple of Jupiter or something like that, well, hey, they got some nice stones. Let's haul these over to our place. And so you see a lot of that kind of thing. One of the subject matters that I've been kind of interested to follow is the swastika on ancient buildings, which you see it a great deal. Like that, and the rosette on the left there. I mean, you have rosettes exactly like that in the Washington Capitol. It's just a common artistic motif. This is an interesting picture that I took. It's on the Golden Dome, and it's marble, cut marble. But what does it look like to you? Look at the one at the top, inside that square. Many people have commented that it looks like the devil. You notice the horns on the top, the face, basically the face of the devil. Do you see what I'm describing? One of the common, you see it a lot, I don't know about a lot, but you see it in the ancient world, where they would do this mirror image. So they'd take a piece of stone, marble in this case, and they would slice it in half and then open it up like a book. And so you've got a mirror image. And that's how that was created. I mean, there's some beautiful, and this isn't particularly beautiful, but it is interesting. And various Christians have commented on the fact, oh, isn't it interesting that you got the face of the devil on the Muslim shrine there, the third holiest in Islam. But anyway, people make interesting comments. On the wall of the temple, here's 70 AD burn damage to the ashlars from arches of vaulted rooms that lined the southern wall. So you remember the Romans burned the temple, and there's the remaining burn marks that are still visible today. That's a little bit more of a close-up of some of that. They burn the stone because when you subject that stuff to high heat, it'll shatter the stone and ruin it. Remains of Roman gates and such. On the western wall, you have parts of it, and what you see, that crumple of stones there, have been pushed down from on top of Temple Mount, landed on the street below. They virtually destroyed the place. That picture of me shows you a little bit of the scale of those stones. Huge stones that the Romans just basically shoved off, broke up the street below, and they've been excavated around them, and there they are. It's our group at the southern steps on one occasion, and there's in the model the picture of that. This is kind of the corner, and this is called the pinnacle of the temple, the high point. There's actually an inscription that they found which basically says this is the place of the blowing, because the shofar would be sounded from that high point, and that was the spot. That's another picture of it. A picture of yours truly, kind of in the east-west grid. Just some of the remains of the place. Just kind of go through these somewhat quickly. That's a nice picture of the road with all the stones pushed down. See the people down there. That'll give you some idea of the scale. This is part of the western wall. This is my two granddaughters, Ava and Talia, who just turned 22. But this is a channel which runs from Temple Mount all the way down to City of David, down by the Gihon, down that way. And, of course, it's only been opened up recently. But you remember they sacrificed all kinds of animals on Temple Mount. I mean, thousands of animals. I mean, you kill 1,000 cows, We slaughtered some chickens a while back, and I thought that was bad. But can you imagine 1,000 cows? Well, I mean, there's just blood everywhere, right? How do you get rid of that blood? You wash it away. And so this becomes basically a drain. So there probably was a day when this channel was flowing with blood and water, washing down into the Cedar, and now you can walk through it. I've done it once. That's adequate. And so I'll be just showing pictures of it henceforth. It's my son Zachary on top of some of that rubble. Some of our group at the southern wall. Oh yeah, there's the inscription on that trumpeter. And these are just some pictures of on top of Temple Mount. That's my grandson Grant, right there in the teal striped shirt. Women aren't allowed in this area, but underneath, when you look at the western wall, when you turn to the left, there are these arches, which are now essentially a synagogue, but only men are allowed in there. But these are basically the arches over which roads went going into Temple Mount. Well, they've excavated this in recent years, and so you look at this. This is part of that excavation. You can go in there, and they've opened it all up. This is some of our group inspecting that giant stone that I just told you about. But this is all part of the western wall that's now been excavated, and you can hike all the way through it, 1,500 feet, and just walk along beside it. It's been opened up all the way through now. There's that top of Mount of Olives with the tower. Yeah, here's some of those columns. This is on the Dome of the Rock, but look at those columns. They don't match each other, so you can tell that they've been gathered from here and from there, and now are part of that building. It was just a very common practice. Well, I'm not sure how that picture got there, but that little stone on the lower left, that's one I described earlier. That from the Solomon's Temple. That's what it is. And I described some of the open area, like look at the beautiful olive trees and what do you call that tall spiky thing? The cypress, yeah. I love that tree. It's beautiful. Okay, let's see what we got here. We got 7:30. What should I talk about? Let me go toward the end of the notes there and describe the Dome of the Rock. It's built in 1691, one of the holy places. But, and it's built, by the way, it was built to be higher than the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So Muslims always have to have the bigger building, the taller thing, to show their superiority. But there's an interesting passage in Revelation chapter 11. There's a future scene. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. So in the final temple, which is yet to be built, God says, measure all of that, but there's a place for Gentiles there, and there's a place that's otherwise. And I think the place of the Gentiles, thank you, that's easier, is in the place that's where the Dome of the Rock now stands. And then Ezekiel 44 describes the future entrance into Temple Mount by Jesus when he goes through with the now closed eastern gate. And when he brought me back the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary, which looks toward the east, and it was shut. Then said the Lord unto me, This gate, the eastern gate, shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, hath entered in by it, therefore it shall be shut. It is for the prince, The prince, he shall sit in it and eat bread before the Lord. He shall enter by way of the porch of that gate, and shall go out by the way of the same. That is the prophecy which says the eastern gate, which has been closed all these centuries, Christ himself will enter into Temple Mount through that gate. How's he going to get it open? Not difficult. The guy who can make the stone go back won't have trouble moving that stone back. And then the prophet Micah gives us something of the future of Temple Mount. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains. It will be raised above the hills. The people and peoples will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between many peoples and will settle disputes for strong nations far and wide. They will beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Every man will sit under his own vine and under his own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid, for the Lord Almighty has spoken. All the nations may walk in the name of their gods. We will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever." That is Micah's description of the future of Temple Mount. I love it, love the imagery of it. I like the man of every man neath his vine and fig tree. So I've planted my vines. I planted a fig tree, which the cold got it. And so now I'm stuck with only my vine. But I got to get me a fig tree and get it to grow, and so that I can sit beneath my own vine and fig tree. But it's kind of a symbol of a great thing. You know, when God rules, you get to sit beneath your own vine and fig tree. And I intend to do that, God willing. And it would be fun to do it there as well. So, okay, let's pause there. We got a little bit of time for questions. Let's see if the text that I've gotten. Okay, here's one that comes in from Jerry Smith. Is the trumpet place on the wall where Jesus would have been taken by Satan during the temptation? It looks like the highest point. That's exactly right. So when Satan took Jesus up there to the high point of the temple, to the pinnacle of the temple, he said, throw yourself down, because the Bible says, he won't allow you to dash your foot against the stone. Jesus was not impressed with the devil's quoting the Bible, because the devil knows the Bible up to a point. He just doesn't know how to apply it properly. Let's see, I think there's that inscription. Okay, let me see it here. Here's the inscription. Among the collapsed stones was one, its replica displayed here, which bore a Hebrew inscription to the place of trumpeting. In the second temple, this stone probably marked a place at the top of the southwest corner of the Temple Mount where the trumpeter announced the inauguration and the close of the Sabbath. But it is the high point, it is the pinnacle, if you will, of the temple. It's farthest reach from low to high. Okay. And it's my sister reminding me we have lunch tomorrow at 1 o'clock, so that's not it. And another relative who has another thing to say, but not on this subject. So if you can either contact, if you're watching on Facebook or wherever it is, if you're watching live on a Wednesday night, you can ask your question. We have it monitored. You can text me the number 425-770-5220, or if you're sitting here in the chapel, you can feel free to ask a question. So the question is, if you're going to Israel, should you take shekels? Well, you can, and I always do, have some shekels. But mostly dollars are good. 4 shekels to $1, roughly speaking. But the dollar is good anywhere and everywhere in Israel. You know, their economy is tied to our economy in many, many ways. And so that 4 to $1 has been pretty consistent. Over the years, over the last many years, 3.75, minor adjustments. But when you get there, you can get some here, but you can also get them at the airport or at a bank, bank machine, you tell ATM, you can get some shekels that way. And so, yes, dollars are good almost everywhere in the world. Yeah. I tried to get some. I had a friend who has connections in Venezuela, and I wanted him to get me a suitcase of money from Venezuela. Because, for $100 you could get a suitcase of money, and it'd be worth $50, next week. But it's apparently illegal to take money out of Venezuela. You wouldn't want to take that valuable stuff away. Like I have a bunch of Zimbabwe money that's going to be about as worth as much as the Venezuela money. I have like $100 trillion note from Zimbabwe. In fact, I have many of them. Yeah, you have one too, huh? Well, don't say I never gave you anything, Gary. It's worth absolutely nothing. But I thought it'd been fun to have a suitcase full of Venezuelan money so I could show people what socialism will do for you. It's worthless money. I had the head of the Democrat Party in Washington came to see me a while back when I was still pastor here. And so he came into my office, and I think he was doing opposition research. But anyway, and so I gave him one of those $100 trillion notes. And I said, yeah, this is what our money's going to be worth when the Democrats are done with it. So I thought it was funnier than he did, but he still took it. And so that was pretty good. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's the Western Wall. And the reason you put it there, when you put your prayers in the Western Wall, is it is nearest that you can access to where the temple once stood. So it's the next best thing to being there, because you're the closest point. That's why it's holy to the Jews, because it's the closest spot. Anybody else with a comment or question? So the question is, how about the safety? Yeah, every gun should have a safety on it. Is that what you meant? So I commented in an email I sent out today about safety. In my opinion, I am safer any place in Israel than I am any place in Seattle. And people say, well, I saw in the news. Well, I saw the news last night and every night about Seattle. And if you go by the news, people are getting shot and, killed and, run over and left for dead on the side of the road every day. Huh? It happened tonight, I'm sure, and it happens every night. So when you read something about Israel, it's not a huge country, but by the same token, anything that happens, especially when Netanyahu's in town, you're going to get in the evening news. If you lived your life by the evening news, you would never go outside. And even if you were inside, you'd be worried because you're afraid they're going to break your door down and come inside. And so you'd be sitting at the door with a shotgun, or a side gun or whatever. But honestly, every time that I've gone to Israel, this will be my 19th trip, there's always trouble. Always has been. But I have never been threatened one time, 20 years ago, I saw some tear gas in Silwan from Jerusalem. I could see the puff of the little blue smoke. That's as close as I ever got to any difficulty. But it's, in my opinion, you're quite safe there. I would rather be there than Seattle any day of the week. Yeah. Yeah. Well, for you that are watching online, it's a testimony about the relative safety that you feel because of the large number of police. Larry Ishmael, probably down there in Central Oregon, or down by Bend, says, by the way, you're getting a nice tan. And I spent all day yesterday shoveling cow manure, putting it around. I planted 700 trees. And so when you're out working like that, you get hot, you take off your hat, and you get burned. So then his other question is recent troubles with Hamas and their rockets. And so the issue there is they did have last week, maybe it was Monday, they fired a rocket from Gaza, which did land in an area in Tel Aviv, which injured 7 people, including 2 kids. Quite rare, actually. And when we're there, you're in Tel Aviv one day, and after that, you're outside the range of those rockets. But that did happen. It rarely happens, but, it does happen. So I don't worry about it too much. I didn't buy a lottery ticket tonight, even though it's up to like $750 million. You're more likely to win the lottery than you are to get hit by a rocket, I can tell you that. And so, or get struck by lightning. Like I've said, if I ever get struck by lightning, I'm going to go out and buy a lottery ticket then, because people never get struck by lightning twice. And so, that your luck would have been there. So, okay. Anything else in here or online that you'd like to ask? No? Okay. So be it. Let's stand together. We'll let you go. Let my people go. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we put our faith and trust in you. We believe in you. We trust you for salvation, because you said if we'd confess our sins, you'd forgive us and cleanse us. We trust you for eternal life. To as many as received them, to them gave him the authority to receive eternal life. We trust you. We believe you. We put our confidence in you. And I pray, Lord, as we go our separate ways tonight, that the peace of God that passes all understanding rest and abide with us all, both now and forevermore. Amen. God bless you all.